Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to the CATAPULT Lockdown Virtual Salon program. My name is Alim Hosein and I'm speaking with you from a bright and sunny Guyana. This afternoon, I'll be in discussion with Niarus Walker from the island of St. Croix in the US Virgin Islands. Before we begin, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to express huge thanks to the CATAPULT partners, including the American Friends of Jamaica, Kingston Creative, and Fresh Milk for making this exciting series of programs possible. Remember, please feel free to ask your questions in the comments section during the talk, and we'll answer them in the question and answer segment of the salon. As I said this afternoon, it is my honor and pleasure to be talking with Niarus Walker. It is my honor to now introduce Niarus and welcome her to the program.
Thank you, Alim. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Hi, Niarus. Nice to be talking with you. Mm-hmm. How are you?
Well, I'm good.
Are you?
It's exciting to be here. I'm ready. And before we start anything, I need to give shout out to my friend Monica Marin. She told me not to do it, but without her, this would not have been happening right now. So, hey, Monica, thank you. I know she's watching right now.
Great. Hello, Monica. Thanks for joining and thanks for getting Niarus hooked up with this program. Now, Niarus is a visual artist. She's an art educator. She's a curator. She's had a long and exciting history in art. She is a committed educator and a very talented artist. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and also a Master's in Art Education. So you can see that she is well prepared and well-rounded. So Niarus, there are many things that we can talk about today. But one of the things that I was interested in is your location in St. Croix. My wife and I had the pleasure of visiting St. Thomas and St. John's some time ago, and we could see the similarities between your islands and the rest of the Caribbean. But the St. Croix is part of the US Virgin Islands, and it has some different political connections. So I would like to start there and talk a little bit about your location as an artist in St. Croix. I know you are originally from Dominica, but you've been living most of your life in St. Croix. We will come to your art journey a little later. But what is it like to be living and working as an artist in St. Croix? What is the kind of support and institutions and galleries and so on that are there available to you to assist you in your work and give you your creative space to outlet your creative work?
Wow, there's a lot to say about that. For us artists working in St. Croix, I can only speak from my perspective. And you can hear me well, yeah?
Yes.
And okay, and as an artist, I feel like I have been supported on St. Croix by my community. I've been teaching for so long, and I know a lot of people, a lot of students. However, as far as institutional support, we don't really have such institutions here. We don't have, say, like a fine arts major at our university. There is no Percent for Art program here. There's no Ministry of Culture and Art to help support and scaffold artists and young and up-and-coming artists here. I've met a lot of people through the years who want me to teach them, to help them. Even as recently as last week, this young man who spent some time incarcerated found, the arts through that form, and he really wants to grow his practice. He wants to learn more, but there is no place for him to go and learn that. And so this is sorely lacking here. However, the one thing that's good here is we have a lot of galleries. You can, I've been affiliated with galleries here from pretty much the start. We have galleries such as Top Hat, who's really been a great place for me to show and showcase my work and to do shows or curate exhibitions. Mike Walsh Art Gallery was one of the first places that really supported my art and me showing art. The Caribbean Museum Center for the Arts, that was founded by Niarus Walker, is probably the only place that's dedicated to the arts specifically, where you can go, you can take some classes, you can, we bring in other artists from different places to exhibit and so on. And yeah, so as far as like financial support, it's a very small pool. We have the Virgin Islands Council on the Arts, from where you can write grants, and there's a college, the Community Foundation of Virgin Islands. But that's really the only two major areas specifically dedicated to arts and humanities for artists on St. Croix.
Yeah. So do you have, like, among artists, do you meet, do you discuss, do you have fora and so on?
Unfortunately, no. I think a lot of artists here work in isolation. I'm not, I can't really testify to why that is. It possibly could be because we do have, a lot of us possibly have day jobs. I'm not sure there's many artists here who are full-time working artists, living and working from and making, sustainable life from their artwork. And it's just, one of the things though that I did over the COVID is that I started a program called Take 5 VI on YouTube, where I try to bring, you take that isolation away by interviewing local artists and promoting them and their work. And I also, so out of that, the idea came for starting salons, like outside salons where artists could meet and discuss. It is not that we don't, but it's sort of like you meet somebody and so you start talking about the arts because you have that in common, but there is no real formal gathering of artists to help build each other in that art community like that. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us more about Take 5. I saw something about it. Take 5 VI. Tell us more about it. How you got the idea to start it, what it does, and what activities you've been doing, and so on.
So I wanted to do something different. I wanted to use my time, although I was painting, of course, but I wanted to use my time to do something else. I thought it was a perfect opportunity during the lockdown to learn a new skill. I was also taking some online mentoring courses for my art and ways in which to market and promote my art. But and learning, so I decided to just reach out to do that. That was one of the problems we had to solve, was to find ways to reach out to the community. So I decided to call it Take 5 VI, because initially it was supposed to be just a 5-minute snippet of an artist's life, and some of them are up to 15 minutes. Because there's a lot to say, and these artists have a lot of beautiful work, and I think it's important to share what we have here together as a community. It's such a small community, Alim, here, and again, our resources are so scarce that it's hard to want to share that, because if an organization has $100,000 to give out, that's and the maximum you can get is say 10,000. That's 10 people. If they really, if your proposal was warranting 10,000, and that's not a lot. So yeah, it makes it a little competitive, but I think we collaborate perhaps on smaller levels, collaborations to do curating, to bring artists down to presentation, things like that.
Okay, so how many persons have hooked up with the Take 5?
About 11 so far. Yeah,
okay,
11 or 12.
And these are persons who are Crucians who have been doing art basically on their own or so on for some time.
Yeah, I've interviewed seasoned artists who've been working for as long as me or longer, and new artists who just started this journey, and not just Crucians, Antomians, and Jonians. Yeah, Just the whole Virgin Islands. I mean, I don't know all the
The
artists,
whole
and it
Virgin
hasn't
Islands.
taken off yet.
Yes.
It's the whole
Yes.
VI. Like
Yes.
I want to promote the Virgin Islands. It's unfortunate, as much as we are a colony, a territory of the United States, we are almost invisible to the bigger mainland issues. We don't get the same support, like we were talking institutional support earlier. That's that comes vicariously through VICA, through the federal government grants that is disseminated through the government, that individuals don't have that opportunity a lot of the time. There is for example, there was a grant that I felt I qualified for as far as my artwork and my education and my experience. But because I was not residing on the mainland, I was told I couldn't qualify for it. And that was the sole disqualification.
Okay, I see. Yes. So it's important that you start some energy in the islands themselves, that you can support your work. I'm very glad to hear about Take 5. That's a very, very good idea. Yes. So now we can talk about your journey from Dominica to St. Croix. When did you and how did you realize your artistic talent? Were you a creative child? Were you, or did you have an epiphany at some moment, or did you discover it while you were going to school, or how did this happen?
There are several points along that journey that brought me here. I remember, if I was to go way back, when I grew up in Dominica, we have rivers, it's the land of many rivers, and you can find clay by the riverbed. And I would grab clay and I would make mud houses and get little broken glass and make windows. And I would use feathers from parrots and build things because they were so beautiful. And so that was my earliest memory of positive steps towards art making. When I moved to St. Croix, I had an art teacher who taught me how to draw the face. And I think that was another pivotal moment where I realized that I really had the skill, at least. And I really loved it. But being a homebody, I wasn't, St. Croix for me was such a different place. Dominica, I could run around, I could go to the rivers, I climbed trees, you walk to school, you walked everywhere, either in groups or even alone. It was safe enough that you could do that. But here, once I got here at 11 years old or so, it was like lockdown. You couldn't go anywhere unless you had somebody in the car to take you. So I was pretty much isolated a lot at home. After school, you go home and you're there. And so that's how my artistic journey kind of began, is being home and getting involved in it. But I'll say that I would be an artist regardless. If it wasn't visual, I would be a writer or some other form of art, because that's just where my heart is and always has been. I like drawing from the television. Never drew from Bob Ross, but there were other people on PBS who would show art programs, and I would practice after them.
Okay, great. And your family, or members of your family, do they also have this creative drive, or are you a unique child in the family?
No. I think my father was an artist in his own way. He was a carpenter, and he built our houses from scratch, and he'd built furniture from scratch. Of course, he didn't have the design aesthetics, but he had the skill. And in some cases he would make curved legs and so on. And he didn't have the education. And even in Dominica, I didn't know about clay. I didn't know about ceramics. I didn't know what I was doing. We put it in the sun, it get hard, it broke, it was temporal. So I never knew that, because, and also when I grew up in the 70s, we drank out of tin cups or plastic cups. So ceramic, we weren't like rich, so I didn't know ceramics. So, but then I have cousins in Dominica and the United States who are artists. Yeah. So I think it comes, at least from what I can see, from my father's side.
Yes. So there is something in the family. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting what you said about your father, because we have so many creative persons who work with their hands. Because in the Caribbean, it's a bit changing now, but we make our things. We used to make our furniture. We used to make our clothes and all of that. But unfortunately now we buy those things in a nice shiny store. So we are losing all of that. In Guyana, the the first generation of local artists, many of them were sign painters. They were painting signs for businesses, but so they had the use of color and shape and form and lettering, but nobody thought about it as art until persons began training and working with them. So I'm glad that your art is actually grounded in practices of the Caribbean. So which serves as a nice segue into your teaching. So were you always interested in being an art teacher, or was it something that you discovered?
I went to art school. I went to art school because I wanted to not have a 9-to-5 grind. I honestly wanted to paint, be the kind of person to sit up till 3 a.m. painting, and I have done it. Wake up at 10 in the next morning or whatever. I just wanted to have this free schedule, but student loans got in the way.
Okay.
And but also when I came home, I realized that there was art education and the art community, from my perspective, in my sub community, because like your community, I'm sure there are many sub communities, and there were galleries in Christiansted. I live in Frederiksted, and I grew up in Frederiksted. But there were galleries on the east side, but I didn't feel connected to that. I didn't even know there were galleries before I left and went to college, honestly. When I came back from college, it's when I really started to think about the art community here and the education here. And having had that art teacher who really inspired me, I decided I would look to teach art. And I didn't intend to stay. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine said, "Don't get stuck teaching."
Okay,
but
yes.
I've been stuck for 25 years.
And you've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I really do. I really enjoy it. Nobody enjoys like administrative, bureaucratic red tape. But as far as teaching art and exposing the students to art and having them experience that, that's an enjoyable journey. And it was a calling. You don't stay in teaching for 25 years if you're not called to do it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that then. So what is your approach to art education? Is art something that you can teach? And what is it that you try to get over to your students? And I know I'm asking a lot of questions. And what is it you try to get them to do? So basically, what is your philosophy of art education? You have a master's in art education. Does that play a role in what you do, or is your art training more natural from the body? So what is your approach to art education?
So when I first started teaching, I think I was stumbling. I was teaching sort of the way I was taught in college. And I just felt like I wasn't doing it right. So that's why I went to get a master's. But it turned out I was doing it right because it pretty much taught me what I was already doing. So I just had to do it felt like the master's gave me more confidence to do what I wanted to do. And so what my job is, I think, is to teach students to value the art, to see it, observe it, and notice it in their lives and in their environments. And one of the things that this lockdown has done for us and the COVID stay in place is that our students are now learning art online. And I really had a hard time trying to figure out how I was going to teach art online. 25 years of teaching, 24 years of teaching, in a brick and mortar space. And now I have to teach it online. And I know the difficulties that I encountered, face to face. So I was a little bit concerned about teaching online. But what I did was realize I had them go into their home and find art objects or objects of art and help them to recognize that around their space that there is art, and that art constitutes so many different things. And it's not just drawing and painting and sculpture. My biggest challenge is to change their mindset about what the arts are and to get them interested in either learning it, supporting it. I don't go out to try to make artists. I try to make art knowers, art lovers.
Okay. Would you say then it's more a question of orientation and attitude rather than technical skill?
Well, I teach adolescents for the most part, and that's where they're at. They want to be able to draw well. They want to draw what they think is they're steeped in realism. So there is that part of it. I've been out of school for a while as far as like learning the new techniques of education, art education. Although I am sometimes part of the National Art Education Association, I do try to create some kind of combination of discipline-based art education with creative expression and visual culture. So that's how how you say structure my curriculum, because part of that lack of institutional support is that we have no art curriculum here for Virgin Islands art teachers. So any art teacher, any theater or drama teacher have to make their own curriculum, and there is some freedom in that, but sometimes it's a lot of work.
Yes. Okay. So I think I read somewhere that as a teacher, you also were responsible for selecting students' work to be exhibited at a Young Artist exhibition annually.
Oh yeah. After my master's, at least while I was getting my master's, I went to National Art Education Association conference, which is a large conference in the United States for art teachers, retirees, any educator, art educator in the arts at any level. And I learned about the Youth Art Month program because it's supported by the National Art Education Association. So I came home in 2006 and just started it. Yeah, I just initiated the Youth Art Month program, and it's a matter of coordinating all the different schools together and art teachers. And even sometimes I would do non-art teachers. If like when my children were in kindergarten, they didn't have an art teacher, but the kindergarten teacher did art with them. So we would display their artwork. Yeah.
So why do you, first of all, do you think that everybody has a kind of creative part of their nature? But this is something that the education system suppresses or growing up suppresses?
I think both things have a part to play in that. I think many factors. The education system, I don't know that they deliberately suppress it, but they do not provide opportunities for it to grow. The focus is, the core, English, math, science, history. And as far as the society, sometimes economic conditions make it, there's sort of like this tacit thing of like the starving artist. And we even have how you say, like a workshop, a time when people go to this little thing to sell, and it's called the starving artist. So this moniker just it's pervasive here in people thinking artists starve, artists don't have to make money. You don't want to do that. You want to be a doctor, lawyer. You want to do those kinds of things. Yes. Those things are supported.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So one more question before we go to look at some of your own artwork. Why is it important to release this creative energy in persons, in your students, even though they might not end up being artists? Why is it important to expose them to art and to, as you said, try to get them to this kind of orientation and realization of art around them?
Let's see. Art, I think a human being is made of three parts, like your body, soul, and spirit. I think art feeds the spirit. If you don't feed your spirit, then your soul is dead. That's my take on it. And also, art is communication. It's a form of communication. So, of course, when I teach my students, I ask them what art is, and they always say drawing and painting. And ultimately, I have to let them know it's a form of communicating. So we read art. A lot of what I do is I teach them how to read visual imagery. I teach them how to see the messages. This is Indigenous Cultures Month, so we just finished a whole series on Native American, Taino, and West African and Australian, Aboriginal Australian work. And unfortunately, each one of these requires an entire semester on its own. But at the very least, I introduced them to that. I introduced them to how these Indigenous cultures use the arts to communicate, to feed their spiritual lives, because a lot of the art was for ceremony and for spiritual reasons, rituals, rites, and community and family building, roles of society, and so on, roles of persons in society. So I try to get them to, I do it because I think they need to feed their spirit. They need to recognize what they're being fed as well, because as an artist, you're part sociologist, part psychologist, part historian. You know, all of these things come into your artwork. And so it broadens your horizons to be able to engage with the art in meaningful ways.
Yes, thanks. I know I said I had one more, but there's another question that occurred to me. Does your teaching influence your artwork? Does your artwork influence your teaching? Or are you able to keep these two as separate compartments in your life?
I think it's impossible to keep them separate. A lot of the times I will have an idea, and that will turn into a lesson plan for my students. But in terms of when I get them to try to execute it, then I learn ways. So as an artist, sometimes you're intuitive and you do things intuitively, but when you have to teach it to someone, you have to break it down into steps. What do you do first? What do you do next? You know, if you're creating a collage, you need to lay your background first, because, you know, to cut around the already laid down images is going to be problematic. So, I mean, you could do it, and I'm sure other people have different techniques, but there's some more efficient ways to create and make art. So, yes, teaching does indeed inform my work. I've learned a lot because I do a lot of research for teaching, and like I said, part of the National Art Education Association is going to conferences and learning from other a lot of the teachers are artists themselves, and they have practices. So yeah, I mean, the basic answer is yes, it works both ways.
Great. Okay, so we can move into a discussion of some of your work. You are basically a creative painter. You work basically in paints and colors. Is that right?
I paint, and I do some sculpture, and I draw.
Yes. Right.
I do many different things because of an art teacher. I teach pastels. I teach acrylics. I teach drawing. I don't teach oils because the environment is not suitable for teaching oil paint in my classroom. But so I feel like I need to be adept at the very least in different media. So I do those different ones. There are times they require. Sometimes something you want to say does not require a painting. Sometimes it requires a quick movement of a pencil or Grantee crayon or even marker. So yeah, I try to use different media for different things.
Okay, so the first piece that we're going to look at is the drawing of a young man, and that is lined up as number 1.
Okay.
And while it's coming up, you said, right, there it is. Now, talk us through this. You said it was from a series entitled Memory and Experience. So when was this series? Yeah, when was this series done, and what is this showing us?
Okay, so I call this series Memory and Experience because it has to do with my experience, a specific experience I had last year that brought me to try and think about what it is I do with my art, why I do the art that I do, and because sometimes you don't have the words to express how you're feeling, and art is just such a remarkable way of talking about what's important to you. This work, so I was recently last year when I started this, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I realized that nothing forces you to reevaluate your life and how you engage with your community or your people or your family than something that makes you face your mortality, such as cancer. And I'm not sure that I was terrified or scared. It's just that all of a sudden I realized there were some things I wasn't really paying attention to. And even if I paid attention to the specific students within my classroom, there's a ton of students outside, and the way they engage with each other and the way they move, all of a sudden, I saw the life in them. I saw the vibrancy of youth in them. And it's not like I hadn't even made sketches of students before, but I started to look at them, more closely as other than just looking at a group of students and seeing the patterns of your uniforms or whatever. I started to look at them more individually, the individual mannerisms, the way they stood, the way they laughed, the way they, two girls might hug each other because you're good friends or help each other out. So this is where this came from. And I realized too that maybe I would not be able to go back to teaching. And mind you, every year I'm quitting teaching. But when when it came down to where I may have had to quit, it was like, wow, I haven't really put enough, and then COVID's not helping, because after last year, now we have COVID, so I'm not even around my students physically. So I'm glad I started this series, because it helped me to really pay attention to my students as individuals. And the second thing is that I needed to complete some work very quickly. Some of the work I do is very deep. It takes me a long time to do it. Also, I had surgery, so I was at home and I couldn't really do anything major. And these works were I did these works actually. I didn't even. I'm sorry. Let me backtrack a little bit. I started those like in January, but then they became so much more important for me as a way to make lots of work very quickly, because who knows, right? Yeah.
But this is an interesting thing, because it's from your own body as a human being, and you found there was this dreaded thing that was happening, and it made you look out to the real world around you and to try to put that down in a tangible form.
Yeah.
So it's a recording there for memory, but it's a very personal record.
Right, and it's my experience that I wanted to maintain. The other thing that I learned that same year was that I have ADHD, and I was like, and for the first time, I made sense to me, what was going on in my head, why I couldn't remember things, and why do I, forget things that were even important to me. And I'm a teacher, and I teach students with special needs, but they don't always tell you when you get the IEP, they don't always tell you what the special need is. They just tell you this child needs this modification. So I may not have recognized that in me, because I had never seen a definition of it, or even to make that correlation, if you will. But I have a daughter who was having some issues, and I started researching. And then once I had to go see doctors and so on, I had to speak with psychologists and psychiatrists, because with cancer, the facility I went to, they they deal with the whole body, the whole mind and soul and spirit, and I learned that there. So the memory and the experience, and so I basically covered everything I do is memory and experience, and the other pieces we will look at still have to do with memory and experience. They may become part of a different named series, but the whole premise of it is that we have generational memories and general experiences that trickle down to us, and we may behave in certain ways or act in certain ways that were not necessarily directly caused by our direct experience, but are indirectly affected through our parents or grandparents or great grandparents.
Okay, yeah. And memory is a very important concept in the Caribbean, because we have to go back over history and beyond history, and beyond what we were taught about our history to really find ourselves. So your journey is also like a Caribbean journey and experience.
Absolutely.
You mentioned.
I don't know anything else.
Yes, of course. You mentioned your ADHD. When you look back, when you discovered that you had that, you look back at your work.
Yeah.
Do you find that had an impact on your work and how you worked?
Well, one of the things is that I could never like focus for a really long time. Like I do one thing and I get bored with it and I need to move on to something else. And I want to try something else. And I think I can do all of these different things, but you just can't, Nemo. You have to stick to this thing you can do.
You have to stick to something.
So I still cannot like necessarily, unless I cannot, I don't necessarily have one specific style that you can recognize as my work, but I will work within a series, a style for a long series. So maybe 10, 20 pieces will look like this thing. And then I'll move on to a different subject matter. So I work in watercolors. I have a watercolor series. The drawings is a different kind of thing. So you wouldn't be able to identify me from the drawings compared to the watercolors, compared to, whatever is in between that. So I think that has something to do with it, but it's something that I have embraced. And a good friend of mine, she said to me, just whatever your weakness is, make it your strength.
Correct. Great. Great. So let's look at another piece of work. This is When Life Gives You Lemons.
Yeah.
Yes. So that involves some imageries about slavery and vanitas.
Right. So
impermanence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So, when it's ironic, when I did this work, this was about the time I was diagnosed, and so it took me a long time to make this work. I had started to write my statement, artistic statement, looking at the world and the temporality of things in the world, and where do we put our focus. I had done an art exhibition titled Anatomy of an Heirloom, and the thought came to me, what did we get? What have we gotten from colonialism? What are the residual effects of colonialism that still affect us today? And I thought about the European lust for wealth and for power. And I like drawing still lives because I'm very technically driven. I love the beautiful, technically drawn imagery. I love skulls. I have quite a collection of skulls. So,
okay.
Skulls. Yes, everything in this work, except for the harmonica, I own. So I thought, I really like the vanitas. I've always liked it. And the vanitas is a Flemish, Dutch genre of creating still lives that talk about the temporality of life, and not to put focus on things, but to look for more spiritual ways of existence. And I thought that, but at the same time, it would be saying, hey, look at all this fun stuff we have, How did they get all these things that they put in their vanitas? It was through trade, and a lot of times through the slave trade. So, and sometimes a vanitas would have an image of a person or a photograph of a person in it. So I decided to kind of question that and try to turn it around and say, look, yeah, you have all these great and wonderful things. And yes, you knew life was temporal, but what did you do to get all those things? How did you hurt and enslave people to get all of those, wealth that you have acquired and this power that you lust for?
So this is a questioning of that whole history and ideology.
Yes.
Yes, and which fits into a European tradition, but is also extremely relevant to the Caribbean.
Right, and I try to interpose Caribbean things in it, in a sense, that things that we're used to, like the pan, the jug. You were the blue one. You were
the blue mug. Yes.
Yes, and then the lamp, right? The lamp that's there.
Right.
And the skeleton
and
key.
Your medium here, is it paint?
Yes, I like painting in oils best. Yes, so this is an oil painting with a wax overlay, and then I superimpose some silhouetted images on top of that.
The wax overlay is very interesting because there was a technique called encaustic that the ancient Egyptians used to practice. Is that what you're doing?
So yeah, because again, this is where being a teacher totally influences my art. I get periodicals and magazines, and I would read them. And there was that's when I was introduced to encaustic medium, and I always wanted to do it, but I was a little bit intimidated by using of the wax and all of that. But one day I just decided to try because I really wanted to move away from just the basic one layer painting. I wanted to create some layering and some depth. And some depth in my work, not just not just in terms of the meaning, but in terms of the actual physical image.
Surface.
Yes. Yeah. And so I decided to try encaustic. As a matter of fact, the piece behind me that you see a little corner of it there to my right, is an encaustic piece. But I prefer, with the flags in the corner, I prefer to use the overlays because, and I may or may not make encaustic again. I mean, I have all the materials, but it's what am I trying to say and what medium fits that story best. Yes.
Great. Yeah. Okay. We will go to one other piece and then we will take some questions from the audience. Okay. So you had the quadrille pieces.
Right.
Which involve the fabrics and the dancing and the dress that women will wear. And you also have a concept of women as the bridges of culture.
Yeah.
So we can look at the three graces, the quadrille. You have a red one and a blue one. We can go, no, that's another Vanitas image.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
Yes.
So that Vanitas concept is very important in your work.
Yeah, it's very important because I think we need to consider our mortality. We need to consider how we live in this world. We need to consider where we put our focus and our values. And but at the same time, again, like I said, we need to consider, if you're looking after things, why?
Why? Correct. Okay, right. This is a great one. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So why did you do this piece and when was this done?
So the whole series of Women Alone, which is an exhibition that will be opening at a new gallery. I'll actually be the first person in that show. My show will open the gallery, basically. It's called Niarus Gallery. Yeah, thank you. It's my friend Sonia Dean, who is an avid collector of my work. So we have a really great relationship. This one is called Sisters, and I wanted to do between the Vanitas pieces. I wanted to do something because the Vanitas are very deep. They're heavy. They're painful to make sometimes. So, because I know a lot of times we have this misnomer, and I try to take that away from that art is like frivolous and it's fun. So be cathartic. And I've made cathartic art, but it's not always that way. And so these pieces were that moment where I wanted to be a little bit free and not be so bogged down in the story of this society and all the things that are wrong with it. And also I wanted to show that Black people of color can come together. You see, this is a lighter skinned lady. I think she might be Hispanic, and a darker skinned lady, and come together and we have fun. Our lives are not always about coming from enslavement. Although the quadrille is obviously, derived from the waltz, we have made it our own. We have embraced it. And how have we, like the last piece called When Life Give You Lemons. We've taken the lemon and we've made lemonade, and it's our lemonade, and we sweeten it how much we want.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a sense, that's sort of what that is. It's also, I think we are in a wave of where women are beginning to come into their own, and we're beginning to stand up more for our womanhood. And I think we need to make sure that as we do that, we take each other along with us and we embrace each other and enjoy life too,
Yes, great. And that Madrasi fabric has a long colonial history. and
Right.
also a history where the women took it and made it something to express their own freedom
Exactly.
and their own personalities.
And Madras
Yes,
is very important to the St. Croix community. I believe that they're right now working on designing their own Madras pattern, and
okay.
it's such a beautiful and graceful kind of thing to watch the ladies dance. And I mean, ladies don't, they have, there's obviously men in the quadrille, but the way that they, like I had a friend on my
Skirt.
Take 5 episode who talked about the movement of the dresses, but I didn't want to, the typical art you might see of Madras is very tight, where the pattern is so important. And for me, it wasn't the pattern that was important. It was the women being bearers of culture, the women carrying on the tradition. Because a lot of the times they won't have enough men in the quadrille group, and women will dress like the man and to do the role of the man in the quadrille dance. I have seen it. So women, we if we really pay attention to history, women are the ones who basically support the continuation of culture, the continuation of traditions, a lot of ways, by teaching the children, teaching the youth. That is not to say men don't do it, but my focus here is specifically bringing to the foreground women.
Yeah.
And I'm a
Guyana,
female. Who else would I?
Who else would you represent? Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, and in Guyana, we, at least some years back, the East Indian women will wear a head tie that they call a romal, which is not as flamboyant as the French Caribbean ones, but it would use either a white fabric or the same Madrasi kind of fabric. We call it Madrasi romal.
Right, and the headdresses here are specific. We have people who are very much knowledgeable about Madras and the specific kind of headwear for, depending on your marital status, whether you're single, divorced, or never been married. There's specific ways that they're tied and created.
Yeah. Well, we can talk a long time more, but let us see if there are any questions. The audience might have some questions for you. So could we have the questions coming up, please? Okay. So this is the first question from Author Girl 144. So she says, I love the initiative you took with the Take 5 project during lockdown. Would you consider opening the series up to other islands in the future, in addition to highlighting USVI practitioners?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I think we are so isolated here. I mean, we're not part of CARICOM, but we are a Caribbean island. Some things some advantages that, CARICOM islands have, we don't have. We can't participate. And some things, because even the United States thinks we're international. I think if we come together as Caribbean nations, Caribbean people, that's fine. I'm all about promoting the arts. I make no money from this. It wasn't about that. And I'm about promoting art and artists. Like, just, I have 2 loves in my life. Like, not counting family members and stuff. And it's God and art. Like, that's it. Right. So, yeah, I will support artists wherever, however.
Great. Great. That's a great initiative. Yes. Okay. Do we have another question? Yes, this is from Annalie. She says, I am inspired by a hybrid practice as an artist, educator, and activist, provoked because of the limited arts infrastructure. How do you balance these various commitments?
So I have summers off, and I work in the summers a lot. It doesn't always translate into working time, but I do. I work on weekends. When I was younger, I would stay up sometimes 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to work. But I found as I got older, I could not manage the morning, and it would take me 3, 4 days to kind of get myself back together after staying up that late. So I try to get work done on weekends a lot. And also, I actually have worked in the classroom. I actually have a piece, a mosaic of the Venus on the half shell from the birth of Venus by Botticelli, that I did this mosaic, and I had my students help me with the mosaic. And for this project, I sent in an image of a paperback dress that was a Madras paperback dress. But I had done a previous dress before where I helped students help me create the modcloth pattern of Africa on paper bag. And so that is how I do it. Sometimes I will work in the classroom. If I'm starting some work and I need a collage base, my students will work with me on it. So I do create some collaboration that way with the students, as we talked about it earlier. That
Great.
helps.
Yes.
My
Good.
neighbors
Thank
have
you.
helped me too.
Oh, great.
I bring everybody in there.
Good. So yes, this is from BIM Vibes. 2020 has been a very challenging year for creatives. How have you been coping?
It's a really relevant question. And I know COVID has been horrid to so many people, but the opportunity to be home has been so positive for me. I was able to finish 2 works that I started, one since last year and one I started in January, and to do an entire series of almost 20 pieces because I was isolated at home. So I had daytime. I couldn't go to work, and also if I went to work, even, I work online, but I'm not putting out the same physical energy online as I would put in the classroom. And it's easier. I'm no longer out there. So I'm not running out to the stores and taking up time to go and do errands before I get home. And you get home, then it's dinner because I have children. And next thing you know, it's 10 o'clock and you haven't been in the studio. But here, I could just get off my computer when class is over, walk into my studio, and I can work. So for me, it's been a blessing, and I'm really hurting for the people who are negatively affected by COVID. But being able to be home for me has been a very positive thing.
Great. Very good. Great. Yes. Any other questions? Okay. So here is one from Catherine. Thank you for being so open about your life and work near us. The connections between art practice, pedagogy, and mental/physical health are powerful. Have you also explored art therapy?
I actually went to get my master's with the intention to do art therapy, but I realized that I really wanted to teach art production and engagement in the process of art more consciously. I didn't really want to evaluate somebody's sense of self or sense of reality through the art, which is what I saw it to be at the time, possibly naively and wrong, but that's how I saw it when I went to study. I did work with special populations. I did some art therapy stuff. For me, art is therapeutic specific. I will, if I need to create some art for cathartic reasons, I will do that for myself. But I think art is therapy regardless of whether or not you approach it directly as therapy. A lot of times, one of the reasons the arts don't get support, especially in education, is there's no empirical data that shows what it does. But you as the teacher, you as the educator, you can see what it does. I've had students come back to me year after year after year. Like I told you, Alim, when I get discouraged that I'm not doing anything, what am I doing this for? Nobody cares. Right at that moment, somebody will text me or a student will say something to me like, thank you for teaching this to me. This really helped me. Or I had a student who I taught 20 some years ago who stopped and said, hey, this is what I did. I want to show you what I did for my daughter and my girlfriend. And she thought it was really great. And they're excited and they remember me. And I think that therapy makes them feel good. But as far as clinical therapy, I haven't really gone. I chose not to go that way.
Okay, yes. You mentioned Botticelli just now, and you were telling me you had a fascination with Botticelli and Dali. Interesting. So, is there any? Yes. Is there another question, or we can talk about Dali? Okay, there is another question from Rachel Thomas Coaching. I find your energy very uplifting and positive, along with your views on the bright side of 2020. Do you consider yourself an optimist? Also, what attracts you to skulls?
I think I'm a little goth. That's the skull thing. I could be, I have been. So that part never left me. And I'm really fascinated with mortality and death. I'm terrified of like horror movies, so I'm like not into that. But I just love dead things.
Oh.
Morbid and morbid. I like skulls.
Morbid.
I find them beautiful. They're a reminder to me. I guess if I never really thought about why I like them, but I think they're a reminder to me of how temporal life is. And there's just something very mysterious about skulls. And as far as my optimism, that is a long time coming. I have had to learn to be optimistic about life, and especially this past year, to really focus on being positive and optimistic. It's a consciousness. I think that's important, and you have to be optimistic as a teacher when you're teaching students, and always be encouraging,
Okay. Yes. So any final question? Okay. Yes, Annalie. Is the art community across the USVI well integrated, or are these quite separate communities?
It's kind of difficult to. I would say there's challenges because of the separation of the island, right? So St. Thomas has its community, and I think I would venture to say they're a little bit do better. But one of the, I can't speak specifically for St. Thomas. And I for example, there's a gallery in St. John, where my work, I can send my work, and I would call her name Priscilla and Michael Knight, because Bajo del Sol gallery in St. John, who reached out to me, and I can show my work there. So if we want to be integrated, we can, but for some reason we remain isolated. On St. Croix, you have different arts communities. We have the communities that do the tourist art, who don't have a real consciousness about why they make art. They just draw and paint, and without communicating much, or even care to delve into that. And it's the typical iconic imagery. And then you have people like me who really want to not be pigeonholed into being a Caribbean artist and making coconut trees and ocean scenes all the time. That is not to say there's not something there. When I first started, that came from college, that's what I did. But you have to grow, and you have to move forward.
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, Niarus, yes, yeah. Niarus, we could continue talking a long time. I think you're a very committed, a rich person. You're a great artist, and I like the fact that the art is grounded in you. It's not something that you do just as you say to just put down something, but it's part of your great creativity. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I wish you the best in your work and the best of health. And I hope we can stay in touch with one another after this salon. I thank the organizers. Yes, I thank the organizers for linking us together. And members of the audience, remember that the conversations continue today. So please remember to tune in again at 4 p.m. AST this afternoon, when I'll be in discussion with Jamaican artist Denise Robinson. And to close today's salon, I'd like to once again, on behalf of everyone, send a huge thank you to the CATAPULT partners, including the American Friends of Jamaica, Kingston Creative, and Fresh Milk, for making this amazing series of conversations and all of these linkages among Caribbean artists happen. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon. Thank you.